Hey, everybody. Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Riverman.
So, Dean, we are kicking off a trilogy today. That's
Ooh,
what I'm calling it.
A trilogy.
The first TEConnect podcast trilogy. Maybe not the first. We had that one with Cordy.
Yes.
But that was spread over like a year, I think, practically.
Yeah.
This is going to be 3 back-to-back episodes.
Nice.
That are dealing with not the exact same topic, but a theme. That theme being artificial intelligence.
Oh, I
AI,
see.
A pretty
Perfect.
popular topic.
Yes. Well, trilogy
days.
has that mystical kind of allure to it anyway.
It does.
So does AI.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we've kind of hinted at it. We've talked about it here and there on a few episodes. We had our marketing AI conversation, but I wanted to bring some more folks in to like really dig into this topic. I mean, it's...
Well, are people talking about AI right now?
I think it's pretty much the hottest topic out there, and we're not above jumping on bandwagons right now.
Right. Yes,
So,
yes.
you know.
Well, we have to kind of educate people, right?
Yeah.
We need to bring in good people who know
And
what the heck they're talking
It
about.
is relevant to our interest. It's not like we're
That's right.
It's not like we're just some other rando podcast about nothing
That's right.
related
That's
to
right.
technology. It's like, let's talk about AI because everyone else is. No, this is relevant to us and our channel.
It is,
So.
very much so.
So this week, our first guest talking about this, we have Raffi Vartian with us from meldCX.
Ooh, good one.
We're going to get into some topics about use cases and unique ones that are out there for AI, for machine learning.
Yep.
We're going to get his perspective on the AI conversation and what
Yep.
that means to him and to a company that specializes in this. Like,
Yep.
what are they experiencing right now that everyone's talking about AI?
Got it.
We're going to talk about visual analytics, which is a big part of what meldCX
I love that
does.
stuff.
I do
Yep.
too. And I think it's just a cool idea, a cool way of phrasing it that I think that I haven't really come across yet. We're going to talk about digital signage in retail in particular, how that's affected by AI. We're going to talk about education, which may be one of those
that's
niche,
a sleeper one.
Yeah, niche industries
Okay.
that you may not think about as much. Maybe a lot of our VARs don't really pay attention to.
Right.
But there could be some opportunities related to AI.
Oh, opportunity there too?
Yeah.
Holy moly.
You act
Do we
like
have
this is
enough
the first
time?
time you've been on this podcast.
Do we have enough time for all this? I don't think we have enough time for all this.
Well, we're going to make it happen.
All right. That's
Since
good
when
enough.
is time ever a constraint for us?
Oh, Marco
will yell at us.
Marco is
and-
going to yell at us. Yeah.
He'll yell at us and tell us we're going too long, but
Wrap it up.
I mean, it's not like, it's not
right.
like we care. We just talk about what we want to talk about.
Let's dive in, shall we?
All that plus our usual value to the VAR. What's tech connecting with us? It's time to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right, as I mentioned, our guest today is Raffi Vartian. He is the VP of Business Development for meldCX. Meld's a fairly new partner for us.
Yes. They came to us through the Intel relationship.
Intel brought them in, recommended them to us. We're excited to have them joining us. So,
Absolutely.
Raffi, tell us a little about yourself. Tell us, what's led you to where you are today. Maybe give us a little kind of a very simplistic overview of what Meld does.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And thank you very much for having me on the podcast today. I've listened before, and I'm excited to kind of be your participant. Hopefully I can be as entertaining as you guys are, by also
It's a low bar.
conveying a little bit of information. Well, I appreciate it. Well, my name is, again, Raffi Vartian. I'm calling you from the suburbs of Chicago. What is Meld? And that's a big one. So meldCX has 2 kind of fundamental pillars within our organization. We've got a part of our business that is focused on device, peripheral, and application management called meldCore, predominantly for signage and kiosk applications. And the part that I specialize in is kind of the computer vision component called Viana, which is centered around retail, banking, QSR applications, where we're taking visual information and turning into data. We'll go into that in a lot more depth. That's a pretty high-level overview. For myself, I'm kind of a technology industry vet at this point. I was in digital signage for about, 13 years or so before I came over and joined Meld to go on this crazy bleeding edge technology journey that we're on right now, and started in the middle of the pandemic, by the way. So I accepted the job in February of 2020, started the first week of March, and said, okay, now what? Right? And on top of that, it's an Australian headquartered company. So our executive management is based out of the Australia region. So timing was a bit of a challenge as well. So we started down the path of trying to kind of bring COVID solutions in 2020. We found our feet in 2021 and a couple of really interesting opportunities, and now we're growing pretty rapidly. We're adding people here in the U.S., and I love that the opportunity beyond this one because we are looking for partnerships within the VAR community. So
there you go.
Is that pretty good for a high level hope?
Bingo.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
Completely.
Nailed it.
Well, okay. So then, I mean, obviously then that lends itself to our first question here, and the first talking point here, which is, obviously generative AI has been the talk of the town, AI in general, but I think it's a lot of it's spurned because of ChatGPT, these large language models.
Now everybody can go in and start playing and get freaked out.
Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's trying to figure out. You get an email every day from some company saying, we've added AI. And you're like, you're a pet groomer. I didn't really need AI with you. I don't.
Or did I?
Did I? I don't know.
Maybe you do. I don't know.
So, it's stuff like that where you're just like, okay, there's plenty of places that AI and machine learning are starting to take over. There's lots of practical use cases, lots of implications for industries that our VARs are working with, obviously. So how's that changed things for you? You mentioned obviously a lot's changed, what you were doing during the pandemic and post, and obviously as a company who is kind of, paying attention to and specializing in computer vision, machine learning, I'm sure now that everyone's talking about this, that's changed a lot of your conversations now that the public at large is much more aware of this technology. So what's been going on in your world?
Well, I think we're all familiar with buzzword bingo, right? So before AI, it was IoT. Before IoT, there's always a thing that people attach things that may not belong together. So what has changed, I think, in our world is that people can understand what we're doing a little bit better, but you really kind of have to fundamentally break it down and explain it a little bit to say that AI has not just arrived, AI has been here for a while, and it is in the products and services that people are using and have been using. For example, autocomplete on your iPhone or autocomplete in your Gmail, if you use that, is the part of the fundamental underpinnings of that language because it's predictive text, right? And ChatGPT is just an enormous version of predicted text. So you ask a question that's something that's insane, right? Which is how I like to test kind of some of these systems. And they'll respond back to you with what they think fits. Now, where they generated that data and how they got all that data, that's coming out. That'll be coming through lawsuits and things like that about how they scrape the internet and people's writing and things like that. I mean, for example, my daughter plays hockey. She's just turning 11 here in about 2 weeks, and they call her Bulldog on the team. So she wanted a Bulldog on skates to be her profile for one of her things. And I said, give me a Bulldog on ice skates. And it took a little bit, but I finally got a picture of it. And that's pretty bonkers, right? If you think about the ability to kind of give it language and prompt and be able to spit something back out. I also did a poem. I asked, write me a poem about the joys and the pitfalls of eating ice cream, right? And it kind of, woe is this, and it's good for you. It's good. It tastes great, but it's bad for you. Those kinds of things. So they're approximating what the answer is going to be based on a prediction of what you might want, right? But that may not necessarily mean that it's kind of factual all the time, right? Because we're not looking for specific kind of research-driven answers in the kind of ChatGPT model. The difference between where it's going now is that you companies like Databricks that are out there that are taking open source approaches and being professionalized around open source, which allows customers to say, you know what, I don't want to feed all my data into this big ChatGPT engine because I don't know what it is. I don't know where it's going to go. It's this black box, right? But what if I can feed it specific information about me and my business, and can it return results that are going to be very interesting and relevant to me? A great use case for me in a sales perspective is that I can feed it quarterly results and end customers that I'm going to meet up with in 130 pages and say, act as an analyst and give me a briefing on it, right? So there's real world practical applications that people can use it for, but people tend to use it for kind of the shiny thing. So we want to break it down and educate. That's first and foremost what we talk about when we say, okay, that's this version of AI. Our version as AI is how we train our computer vision models, and then how do we put predictive information about some of the data that we're gathering. And I can break those two down if you'd like me to, into some of the things that we're working on. But let me just take a pause there to say, does that makes sense so far? I mean, that's a mouthful, so I want to make sure that pause.
Absolutely. Well, there's quite a few things there, actually. When we think about what generative AI has, when it came into the world, if you will, here recently, it really was just one of those moments where people scrutinized, autonomous compute all of a sudden. It's like, whoa, number one. Number two, it humanized it, in a way that, okay, I can have predictive text as you're referring to, Raffi, but to actually ask something a question and have it respond in a very human-like way, I think that's what kind of, those are some of the divides that these LLMs are kind of producing out there for humanity, right? It's like, whoa, I already heard about this AI stuff, but I just thought it was people in the back room coding some stuff, right? And writing some stuff. I didn't think I could interact with it quite like I have been able to. But it's really interesting, and it's fascinating where your company kind of starts to fit in, because I think that this is exactly where business is going to start utilizing this type of AI, in the sense that, we want to feed it specific information about our business, right? We don't want this nebulous, big sky stuff. We how does this relate to our world being a quote unquote business, right? Whether it's a retail, hospitality, whether it's a distributor like Blue Star, okay, great. Well, how do we start using this information to feed information that we can now utilize, right? In a new way.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
well, then Raffi, take that down that path then that you mentioned about breaking it down a little further.
Sure. Well, I think that we all need to sell things in life, right? I mean, that's kind of how we make livings. We sell technology to customer that solve business problems. And so that's kind of how we want to start off with it and say there's a lot of things that we can do to kind of educate, but what is the business problem that we're really trying to solve? It's certainly not trying to write a poem about ice cream or trying to generate pictures, to entertain your daughter. That's not what we're really trying to do with this stuff. So what we talk about when we talk about generative AI, let's bring in a few more buzzwords. So if anybody has their bingo card at home, we'll bring in a couple more. Everybody remembers the metaverse and how that was going to be the next big thing, right? And how Meta has spent tens of billions of dollars within this space. Well, it turns out it's a bit of a ghost town, because strapping things to your face and being in an alternate universe can be a bit disconcerting for humans.
Don't tell Zuckerberg that. I think he's going to disagree with you, but go ahead. I happen to agree with you, but go ahead.
It turns out that he doesn't have my number and he's not listening, in my opinion. So,
I don't think he listens to this podcast either.
Right.
Yeah, we're
fair
good.
enough. Fair enough.
You never know. You probably got AI scraping all of it. There you go. Well, there's been. I liken it to what happened in the late 90s when fiber was run across the Atlantic, right? And really kind of these internet companies went pop, but the infrastructure was there. So they valued at X amount, right? They went out of business, but then somebody took over the pipes and made the modern day internet. So if you can think about the investments that have gone into the metaverse and all these different massive kind of computing environments and the stuff that you strap to your face that may or may not look hilarious from outsiders, that's the kind of generative AI that computer vision models need. Okay, so let me dive into that a little bit. Computer vision is a terminology that quite literally means when we see a camera view, we're going to do the best that we can to train a models to extract data out of those cameras. Because my friend Mark Scanlon over at Cisco, I'll give him credit for this one. It turns out that loss prevention, 99% of it is in the loss recording, if you will, if we want to kind of look at retail, because it's a tool for people to be able to record things to then go reactively interrogate. And so what we're trying to do is implement models that say, what are the things that you want to investigate and gather information from on a real-time basis or near real-time basis in order to tell you something so that you can ask the question. And the question may be, how many people have gone through my drive-through today? Or how long are they at the order point? Or whether they're making the model of automobiles? Or how many people have gone into my retail locations? Things along those lines. So in order to kind of feed those models and train those things, we create simulations. Our version of generative AI that mimics a real-world environment, i.e. the metaverse, and runs millions and millions and millions of simulations. Things like different camera views, different weather conditions, different makes and models of cars, all kinds of different stuff in order to get those models to be trained up very well. And you have to continue to train them. So when it comes to the AI world, while we're not dealing with the language, it rhymes from the infrastructure that we have to put in and the work that we have to go train the model. But again, the difference is that we're not trying to ask it questions about anything that could potentially happen. We're asking questions about what is the customer's business outcome? What are they trying to achieve from that computer vision model?
Interesting. Yeah. So, right, narrowing it into a specific use case in this particular world. Yeah. So, when you talk about training and simulation, then help us understand how that parlays into. I mean, what's the process then? I mean, you're going through an iteration where you're taking information that is provided by the customer, utilizing that to make the predictive model, and then implementing it. Correct. But before implementation, you can already start extrapolating what you think is going to be the business intelligence that's going to come out of it. Is that right?
It is. And so let's just take a step back to say that you've really hit on the key point, which is what is the business value of implementing the technology? So if we don't have a business problem to solve, and if we're just looking to do technology for technology's sake, it doesn't matter if it's computer vision or something else. We're shying away from it, and probably so should your customers, right? Because if they're like, oh, this is really interesting technology, okay, do you have a budget for it? Is it going to solve a business problem? Right. And I think that's what we all have to ask as professionals. So that's kind of how we want to start. What we try to do, though, is find the thematic items that will be true in multiple industries. So if you can think about loss prevention and what the cameras are being used for, they're predominantly about tracking people and automobiles. Right? That's kind of what the two kind of main categories are. So when we look at the market, we can say, okay, out of those two kind of main categories, where can we commercialize around? Where could we say, if you have a camera already and you tie it into this product, what can it give you? Ins and outs and things along those lines. So general models we train and we can deploy as kind of canned, if you will. And then when you go into more specific use cases, we can train custom models from scratch. So we sit down and we develop a scope of work, and then we come up with a model training environment and how many millions of simulations will it take to get to the level of accuracy that we need. Anything from pick and pack environments in warehouses. So, there's a couple of models that we can basically and deploy where people are moving, things along those lines. But when it comes to things like hand tracking, and looking at specific boxes or maybe specific barcodes and things like that, that's where we start to go through that customization process. But we try to come with about 80% of it already built. So then it's just kind of tweaking and customization from there. If that makes sense. I'm not sure if I answered the question exactly, but that's kind of what our approach is.
No, that does make sense. Well, then let's dig a little further into this idea of visual analytics, which obviously ties into what we're talking about with computer vision here. It's a big part of what you're doing at Meld. And even the Vienna platform obviously is built around that idea of visual analytics. So explain to us a little bit more about what that means. I think you've already touched on some of that already, but how is that fitting into some of the existing solutions that VARs and ISVs might be going out there and selling right now, or some of the emerging tech stuff that's coming down the pipeline where this kind of visual analytics is going to be able to fit right into what they're already doing?
Absolutely. Well, let's pose a question. If you were to develop a website today, and you gave a scope of work for somebody to build it, and you say, I want to have a part of an e-commerce platform, right? That's going to have some kind of checkout, and we want to understand customer pathways and things along those lines to understand if we've optimized our website. But you have no cookies and no tracking, right? And no intelligence built into how people are navigating your website. You'd probably go, well, how do I know if it's performing? Right? And that is the same in retail, except for the retail environments have already been built. And the question of how they're performing is typically a lagging indicator of sales, right? Or maybe there's some basic information, like for drive-through, there's those metal strips that when people drive over, it has the stop and the start, right? Of how people going through a line, but it's much more nuanced and complicated than that. It's about how long the line is to go before you order, then how long orders take. And there's this accordion effect that goes on throughout a drive-through, things along those lines, right? And so we're trying to extract all this data and create an environment where people can actually understand it and provide value of it, right? So a lot of times when we talk to our customers, they go, I want a specific use case. I want to know exactly what staff is doing at this time and that day. And we go, no problem. Why? Oh, well, because we want to help on our labor practice. Oh, okay, interesting. So tell me more about that. Well, we're having a hard time hiring people in these kind of quadrants, and we don't know if we're overstaffed and all the rest of that. And we say, interesting. Well, that sounds like a density issue. And so then we go into our description of kind of the three categories, and I'll kind of riff this way, three categories of what we're trying to understand from a visual perspective, right? The easiest to understand is density. How many people or vehicles are in certain places at certain times? And those are things that cameras, it's fairly easy for us to do. Ins and outs, people counting is what that's commonly kind of referred to. The next one is kind of utilization. How are people spending time within a space? So you get the counts of people in and out. Then you go, okay, well, let's heat map and start looking at, are there areas within this environment that people just don't go? Or is there, people that are really, really high density and you're looking at choke points within an environment? So that's the kind of utilization perspective. The most difficult one to do is what's called collaboration. And that's how people are interacting with one another. Okay. So this could be line queues when you're looking at like a QSR about how people are kind of managing themselves, if you will. The distance between people is something that we can measure. The total amount of people, where they go, and you take all that data in, extrapolate it, making something that says, this is how long people are in line. These are the choke points, things along those lines, right? So from a broad perspective, those are kinds of the high-level business concepts that we're trying to solve. And the modules that we deploy, and then it always gets more complicated from there. We tell our enterprise customers in particular that we invest a lot in our UI, right? We've got ways of clicking and searching and bringing up data and all this great visualization, right? But fundamentally, our large enterprise customers are just looking for us to provide the data after we validated the fact that, yes, we can get this data that's valuable to your business. They want to ingest that directly into their business intelligence platforms. Because who wants another UI and another dashboard, right? And so then we can go into the whole backend infrastructure. So it's complex. In some instances, it's simple. We've got things where you can just hang a camera, send a model down, click a button, and you'll get data within a couple of hours. Basically, it'll start generating about people counting, things along those lines. But when you talk about the integration of business systems, it can get incredibly complex, but it's incredibly sticky and very valuable.
And you kind of have to feed both worlds, I would imagine, because so everybody's interested in this.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have a small mom and pop, organization wanting some basic utilization of computer vision AI,
right.
And then you're going to want the Krogers of the world and
right.
people like that are going to want fairly sophisticated systems that are tied in. So let's dive in a couple areas, and thank you for your explanation on the three parts that you're seeing: density, utilization, collaboration. I wonder, are a lot of your customers starting to come to you with maybe it's the fourth, which is behavioral, right? So it's using computer vision to predict behavior or see behavior like theft detection. We're starting to see a lot as it relates to, for example, self-checkout, where, the computer vision system is being utilized to determine whether or not theft is actually occurring right then and there, whether or not, somebody's scanning a bubble gum but putting into the shopping cart, I don't know, a socket wrench, that is clearly not
the $50 item. Yeah.
The $50 item, right? And so using computer vision behaviorally to sense that. Or maybe it's back a house when you're sensing safety issues like a fall detection and things of that nature. So is that where your world is kind of expanding? I mean, I totally get it. I get the easy, to me, the easy part of AI, I'm using air quotes because it still is fairly sophisticated. Oh, the density, how people are using the space. A lot of people aren't even there yet.
Right.
But it seems like you're probably already getting asked to do fairly sophisticated behavioral and things of that nature. So just your take or commentary on that.
It's a great question because it leads us into kind of a bit of non-obvious line of thinking. Okay. And so the answer is yes, we've been asked to do some of those things and we've accomplished some of those things. The picking and packing that I was talking to you about, right? These are live orders that would come in, and within about a third of a second, we'd be able to recognize those orders and see if it's happening in real time to ensure that that behavior, that in-person thing is doing the right thing, because lagging indicators, when boxes go out for shipment, when people complain 90 days, 120 days later, that's when they understand that they've had a problem, as opposed to instantaneously. Okay. So when we're talking about self-checkout, the same idea. You want that information in real time. So goes the idea, so that you can interrupt that process and say, put up a flag and say, item not recognized, so that somebody can come over and help you fix it, right? Which makes sense in a self-checkout environment. Here's the problem. Outside of self-checkout, the vast majority are people checking out just like traditionally, right? So whether that's a C-store and hundreds of thousands of small mom and pops, whether that's your larger kind of pharmacy that doesn't have self-checkout, how do they find those trends and behaviors? And the reality is the problem is a little bit larger than what you can usually gather in real time, because of the capital intensive nature of real time information. So our approach is to take a bit of a step back, although real time is always going to be possible. And of course, we love Intel, right? And we love folks over NVIDIA and all the rest of it. And they want to have that level of edge computing for real time. The question that we ask our customers is, what's your way of working right now? And if we could solve your business problem, what's the gap between real time, i.e. very, very capital intensive, right? And what you're seeing right now. So this more specific example that we can talk about for loss prevention, there's theft at self-checkout. There's loss at the register and what we call customer not present, right? And that is a combination of data, effectively, to say if the cash register is open, but you recognize that somebody's behind, but there's nobody in front, that should be something that gets investigated, right? And right now, that is being handled, we call exception-based reporting, with a lot of POS vendors. So they'll look at transactional data with AI, again, AI coming back into the conversation, to see if they can find anomalies and then bring that back and say, you probably want to interrogate that, right? But a lot of customers have that 90-day retention policy on their video so that they can go back and review it. We talked about before. A lot of it is loss recording and not loss prevention. So there's a blend. There's an area between 90 days from now and instantaneous where we can identify some of those behavioral patterns. So for example, the density information can give you just as much information about organized retail theft, where behavioral patterns can as well. So let's make a distinction. Behavioral meaning that we're looking at how people are reaching and touching things and maybe putting things in their vest or their jacket in order to steal, right? But just as important is organized retail crime, when 7 people come in at the same time and they all spread to far corners of the store. We don't have to see their hands and their heads and their behavior and all the rest of that capital intensive, to understand that we've got dots on a map and the dots spread out like that. We train the model to say, if we see that kind of distribution, that's when you start to say, prompt the LP person to start paying attention. So my point is that there's an in-between instantaneous and then there's the 90-day. There's a lot of area to fill that is not as capital intensive, but can be just as illuminating from a data perspective.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, I think, if I'm going to really oversimplify this, seeing's believing. Mm-hmm. And we know this, if you've ever worked in retail, if you've ever worked in any place where I can, from my own experience, I can identify this, where corporate might be saying like, hey, you guys aren't doing this well enough. You're not selling enough of this. You're not focusing enough on this. We're not seeing the numbers we're supposed to see. Or, hey, we're going to take this out of stock because you're not selling enough of it and we think you should be selling more. Or it just doesn't seem like it's selling enough, so let's move it out there. Mm-hmm. The person who's working that day-to-day might be like, hey, I know the reason for this. I know that this is happening because we put this particular product in a part of the store that's always got a line from the checkout counter in front of it, so no one ever sees those products. Or I know that this particular stuff is getting stolen a lot because it's high value and we've shoved it at the back of the store somewhere. We put it into the darkest corner that no one else ever goes to. Yeah. It's the kind of stuff like that where our own trained eyes and these computers that work in our own brains, we know the problem. And I feel like all we're doing now is we're just building technology to help catch up with that, to understand like, hey,
or automate
someone,
it.
Or automate it.
Right.
If we're doing what what we don't have enough people to do every day, which is see what's happening and make those decisions based on what's seen. Let's build some automation into some intelligence into the back end, into these cameras to do some of that for us and to make that actually happen for us. I think that's ultimately what we're trying to accomplish here is like, hey, let's, especially in a world where we're always talking about labor shortages, we're always talking about not having enough people. Imagine you're the one sole person responsible for loss prevention in a big box store or a chain. Let's say you're the loss prevention specialist for 5 stores. Well, I'm pretty sure you can't be in all 5 at the same time watching to see what's happening. But to your point, if you've got a system set up that's like, hey, anytime a group of people walk in and disperse to different corners of the store, let's send out an alert. And even if you're that person and you're in another store that day, the least you can do is at least, hey, I got this alert, call the store manager and say, hey, I just got an alert that there's some folks, that kind of dispersed. Just want you to keep a heads up, keep an eye out. Doesn't mean you're going to prevent them from doing everything.
Right.
But at least you're getting a little more ahead of the game than where you were before. So in my mind, I think that's a big part of this is just understanding that numbers can say one thing, and I think that's what we've all learned to rely on is numbers and data in the back end. But the tape, the recording, the video, that can say something entirely different. I think if you figure out a way to merge those two, then all you're doing is just improving the data flow and improving what you get out of all of that data.
Absolutely. There's a reason why a lot of the AI companies call their products Copilot. Whether that's Microsoft or GitHub. I mean, GitHub's part of Microsoft, but they call it Copilot because they want it to feel like it's a assistant to you and when you're doing your work, and we're no different. We want to say, what are the business problems you're trying to solve, and how do we get you there to be able to kind of create that data? So that audience could be loss prevention, it could be operations, it could be marketing. In one instance, we've got a customer that's looking at, okay, we don't really know anything about our store and where are people going and how they're interacting with their time. And so what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll find all the different categories and the products within those categories. So from a high level, again, we don't have to track people picking up specific, Sharpie pens or things along those lines and putting them down. We know that if they're engaging in specific areas and their body is giving us the indication that they're spending time there, that we've got some level of dwell or engagement within that area. We can even, from a broad level, look at how people are reaching out their hands to know that that's almost like a mouse click, if you will, in that area. And then we start bringing out the categories, look at the point of sale data and say, oh, okay, this is the journey of the individual customer that has gone through and kind of touched those places. Just want to make a big caveat here in saying that we don't care who that person is. It doesn't matter. We actually go out of our way to ensure that we are not collecting PII information. We got all kinds of information up on our website and things that we can send along about how we do that and how we strip out all the PII and how we get compliance information from a third party that audits us. So just want to put that caveat out there. So to take the creepiness factor away the best that we can. But if you look at how you kind of look at the generic pathways and you can think of personas, is how the kind of marketing folks talk about this stuff. What are the personas or people that are kind of walking in? What are they engaging with? And kind of most importantly, what is the match between the products and the sale? So if you notice that there's a lot of dwell time within specific areas, but that's not converting to a sale whatsoever in that category, you can look back and check the tape and see if people are pulling out their phones and they're, taking pictures of those items, but not buying them. So that tells you that you might have a pricing problem. You might have a showrooming problem. There's just, frankly, an unlimited number of ways to be able to investigate that data, depending on what, again, the business outcome is for the customer.
So let me dive a little bit before we get into digital signage on object recognition, because what I'm hearing you say is that object recognition in a retail space, for example, to do that in real time and to recognize it and to prevent fraud and theft and all those things takes a certain amount of investment, right? Like compute power and whatever. Whereas, is that what the business is requiring? But, I'm fascinated because, what was the Amazon store where it was completely frictionless? Was it Amazon Go?
Yeah, Amazon Go.
Yeah.
Which I think they shut down, if I'm not mistaken, or
some of them.
Some of them they had a
they
version.
Scaled it back a bit. Yeah.
They had a version at NRF, and I just walked in and I picked up a couple things and I walked out.
Right.
I don't think I got charged for them because I don't think it was operating correctly. So it wasn't my loss prevention. It was like a free candy bar from whatever.
Sure.
But my point here is, I mean, it doesn't seem like, so you're making the argument that it takes a lot of resources in order to facilitate something like that. So maybe we're not as close to that kind of nirvana of frictionless cameras eyeing everything. And, what do we need RFID and things of that nature for? Because it just takes a heavy lift to make that happen. So is object recognition just something that's going to be, in the retail space down to the object, something that's a couple years out because of the compute power and what it requires to do that?
Oh, it's a great question. So let me kind of break it down a little bit and first ask the question rhetorically, is that nirvana?
Right. Oh, that's a really good point. Okay,
right?
Fair enough.
We're heading for a Minority Report here. Yeah.
Well, a little, somewhat. I mean, if they're coming out with palm recognition as a form of payment, they're trying to commercialize that. So Amazon's got a strategy of building out their own kind of retail environments, and of course Whole Foods and acquisition, and then testing out some of the technology to see if they can sell to other retailers as well. But you're kind of letting the fox in the hen house a little bit when it comes to Amazon. I think a lot of retailers have recognized that. So that may be one of the reasons that they scaled back. But I know for sure that if you go into one of those environments and you just look at the density of cameras that are in the space, because they're about every 10 to 11 inches.
Wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
So you've got that, but you also have pressure sensors on the actual shelves themselves. And those cameras are not security cameras in the way that an Axis or a Cisco Meraki or a Hanwha or anything like that. They are specialized cameras that have sonar effectively built into them, so they can look at the three-dimensional range of the things that you're interacting with. Wow. Okay.
Wow is right.
So that's lot of computing. That's a lot of computing.
Yeah, I don't see a mom and pop store doing that.
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean, there's been some examples that are funded that are great from a PR perspective. That's true. The question is, how far away is Nirvana? Is it 2 to 3 years away? And how can we do things like recognize products? So our approach is to say, yes, we can. But again, we go back to frequency, right? So when we think about product recognition, can we train a virtual grocery store to recognize all of the hundreds of thousands of SKUs within that environment? It's actually not that hard. And so we would look at the website even and be able to kind of ping the API potentially, take all the product description, take a look at it, and make sure that we've got digital representations, run lots of models. So what do we get out of that? We could have an environment where if you had enough computing, you could look at people looking at real time, pulling something off the shelf, looking at it, then putting it back, right? We can look at that type of behavior. Or we could just say, we know that there are products there. We know that this is what the planogram is going to be. We'll check the planogram every hour. We use the same cameras to just do a bit of a scan. We won't see every product and every shelf, like you can't see behind certain things, and there won't be any pressure gates, but you have very little capital investment, and you get about 80% of the data. So you take the hourly snapshots, and then you look at that customer behavior about how they're moving and how they're interacting, and you can infer based on that, and then based on what actually happened, the data that you're looking for. We're inferring how many times people went to an environment and didn't take something off the shelf because it didn't end up in a basket. So that's the kind of data that we're really kind of focused on, because we think it's frankly neglected in the market, because it's this kind of drive towards real time, or drive towards, well, I don't want to buy it unless you can absolutely recognize the Sharpie. Really? Because you've got the POS data, and yeah, there might be some loss that's associated with it, but when they don't understand the big data problem, it's hard to justify the investment to be able to recognize a Sharpie.
Yeah. And yeah, I think you're right, Raffi, in the sense that were you at Intel Vision recently? Well, it was a couple months back.
I was in one last year, and
anyway,
there was another one recently.
Yeah, it was recently. Yeah. But anyway, they were showing the technology. There was a mix of Getty and what they call Zion Creek, which is their computer vision recognition objects, and applying it to like a C-store example. And the idea here would be, one of the challenges that you would face is, well, if I'm a C-store and I'm owner and I bring in a new vendor, and that now how do I get that into my point of sale system so that I can enable what I'll call a semi-frictionless, point of sale departure or checkout. So that if somebody walks up with an object, shows it to the camera recognizes it, and that's a pack of gum, or that's a Coca-Cola, or whatever it is, in real time. And they were just showing how you can do that at the store level. So it feels like it's kind of getting there. And I think you've expressed a couple of the other intricacies of trying to get to that world. And maybe you're right. Maybe the nirvana is not the nirvana of anyone. But I'm telling you, yes, my 21-year-old daughter, she just wants to walk in, pick up something, and walk out. She loves the shopper experience, but doesn't want to be burdened, by
walking to a counter and scanning
things.
things.
That's right. Yeah. If given the option, right? If given the option, well, which would you rather do? Sit in this? What? Even you, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which would you rather do? Hit a kiosk where you got to touch things?
That's my dream scenario.
Or just
go
walk
pick it
right
up and
out.
go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Last thing, Raffi, real quick. Sorry, John.
Sure.
The PII, which is really important, and I'm glad you brought it up because it's something that's referenced here. Do you? And I don't know the legality behind it. Has the law even caught up with where we're at with computer vision? And,
oh no.
Yeah, that's what I thought. No. Right? Yeah.
Speaking from the early part of my career, and please don't cancel this my participation in the podcast, but I started off in politics, so forgive me. I spent 5 or around almost 6 years in D.C. on Capitol Hill, and working in kind of fundraising and things like that. I won't belabor the point. The only point that I'm trying to make is that policymakers are never going to catch up. So we have a decision as an industry to go in one of two directions. We could allow for all kinds of business practices, and then hope that you don't get legislated around it. So a good example of that would be mass deployment of facial recognition within retail, to be able to look at it. And it's not banned right now, except for by certain states, to collect biometric information like that. But we're never going to go down that path because we don't see that there's any intrinsic value of identifying individuals. So what we do is we look at California privacy, we look at GDPR in Europe, and we say we will implement the same level of standards of anonymized data within a physical environment that people need to use for online, so that we are anticipating of where the market's going to go. Because I'd much rather have a piece of paper that says we've been audited to this level of standards and we don't take any personal identifying information than it be the other way. And that is the importance of edge computing, right? And being able to kind of inference these things on the camera or on that computing, destroy all that data, right? So we kind of do it in the memory of whatever edge device that we're at. So we even can't retain it, right? We tokenize things and we ensure that we are as anonymous as possible. And even in drive-through, believe it or not, we don't even look at license plates. We look at the unique profile of what the vehicle looks like. And if you don't run OCR, right, you can't read the actual letters and numbers. So we just look at a unique fingerprint. We track it for that, anywhere between 1 minute to 15 minutes that it takes to go through drive-through. And yes, for some it does take 15 minutes. And then we destroy that token on the way out. And we document that, and we've got full transparency to our customers. So we're on the side of go hard.
Yeah. I hear you, but I'm going to challenge you on the Minority Report of the world would challenge you that maybe maybe certain parts of our society would be okay with being identifiable walking into a retail environment. Oh, hi, Dean. How was that sweater you bought the last time?
It's like we always talk about that.
People cringe about if they knew what was being collected about them now online, they would be like, whoa, what?
Yeah, everyone says, I don't want to be the one caught on camera and people knowing who I am. Like, but you also just opened up your Facebook and flipped through and liked and touched 50 different posts that basically told Meta everything they need to know about your entire existence.
Right. That's right. So to me, it's an interesting conversation, and I think we're in this world. I think you've illustrated it very well of what is being done today. And of course, I don't disagree with you, and we're in your position. If I was running the company, I'd be probably doing the same thing, right? Of complying to not having that information. But it's intriguing to me to see how this is going to manifest itself over time with what the younger generations are willing to give up, give up in the sense of, unique identifiers to an individual for the sake of convenience and or things of that nature, right? So it'll be curious to see.
And I think there's an important lesson to our VARs and to anyone working in this channel that wants to get involved in these kind of solutions too, is to make sure that the companies you are working with are a company like Meld who have already thought about this.
That's right.
Have already got guidelines set up for it, because eventually the law will catch up. You're right. It's going to be stupid 100%. Far behind. It's going to be absurd. I'm sure you're like me, that you probably watch Capitol Hill hearings from time to time where like a senator says, so how does the app get into your internets?
Well, the average age is 65.
Yeah,
Did you just see that? Yeah, right.
So I can imagine that, because I know what that frustration is like, is anytime you hear any tech hearings on Capitol Hill, it's always like, oh my God.
It's a laugh factory.
I can't believe that these folks are responsible for making these laws. So yes, it's going to be behind. But I would think you would want to find a company that already is saying, hey, before anybody starts really asking these questions, before the law catches up and the lawsuits and companies are going out of business because they didn't do the right thing, we're going to get ahead of that and already figure out exactly what we do and don't use, what we're anonymizing, where we're not capturing PII. I mean, I think it's just that's got to be a base level if you want to work with a company in this kind of technologies. You've got to be asking those questions up front and making sure they're being upfront about that before they even get started.
I think so. And if I could just summarize really, really quickly, like there's a range of solutions that you can get, right, that will go from the very, very basic to the very complex. And when we spoke before about tying in that data and saying, like our dashboard, the enterprise customers are never going to use it because they want to live pipe our data into their platforms so that they may inform maybe their mobile app that anyone's that's downloaded has already accepted the terms of service and saying that basically they're being tracked and all the things from the phone. So yes, a lot of the things are possible on the camera. The question is who owns the relationship, and it's not the technology vendor. It's not even the VAR or the distributor. It's the retailer in this instance. So if you give them the capabilities of engaging directly on the phone or maybe on some digital signage, I know we're going to talk about that in a second, then you get rid of the creepy factor, number one. And number two, you get to stay clean and stay in your lane as a vendor or as a supplier to the retailer.
That's really fair. That's a fair frame.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, let's.
That's a good segue into digital signage.
There you go.
Let's segue into something else. They might be watching everything you do.
Yeah, really.
So let's talk about digital signage. There's a couple of very unique use cases I want us to wrap up with. Digital signage being one of those, because we know that it really can greatly impact marketing, retail, hospitality, corporations, etc. I'll cite a statistic that I found on one of your blogs about digital signage. 63% of people reported that digital signage catches their attention more so than internet ads, TV, or traditional billboard advertising. I would agree with this. I'm not someone that cares about ads on television or the internet. I ignore most of that stuff. I don't even see
them on the internet
if I even look at it at all, right? But you give me a good piece of digital signage that's got a really cool, unique thing that's catching my attention, and I promise you I'm probably taking a look at it. So knowing that that many people are engaged with digital signage, because part of which, we all carry around a digital sign in our pockets all the time. It's always got our attention. How do we marry AI with digital signage to kind of take that potential to the next level?
Well, it's a great question. So there are vendors, of course, and you work with a lot of them that have had solutions that look at the audience of people that are watching content and can both give you an understanding of how long people are looking at things, basic demographic information, and then be able to create an environment where you're going to change content based on the folks that are directly in front of you, right? So that is kind of computing behind a digital sign with a camera that's looking down and saying, okay, how is this person engaged? What I would challenge that with is that is a point-to-point relationship, right? So you have a big screen and a big investment with a 1-to-1 or maybe a 1-to-2 or a 1-to-3 relationship between the camera at any given time and the person that's standing in front of us. Well, we described earlier, this idea of density and utilization and collaboration is about what happened before the person got to the screen. Because that's how people run their websites. That's the reason why there's tracking and all the rest of it, because they want to get, and I swear to God, this is a real term, a psychographic profile of the individual, so that by the time they get to you, they know what to sell to you, right? So if you like Subarus and you like this and you like that, that's how they kind of combine data. For our experience, let's take a grocery store, for example, working one with one in Australia that is tying in that real-time movement and product engagement into their digital signage strategy. Because what we've found, I'll give you another statistic, that if a customer is exposed to an ad around 7 times within a given time period, i.e. a shopping experience, they're about 40% more likely to buy the thing that they're exposed to. So if you think about it, we're looking at a journey, again, in a grocery store. I am a list shopper, right? I know exactly where I'm going. I've got my list in front of me and I hit those things and I rarely deviate from that because I salute smartly when I'm told to go to the grocery store and I buy the things, right? That's my job. Some people go up every single aisle and they use it as a social experience, or they're like, okay, well, all right. And they call their friends or they call their significant other and what do we need to buy and all the rest of it. So those are two different bookends of the profiles, but I'm using it as an example to say, when you're walking up and down those aisles, how many times was somebody exposed to that ad and does it derive an actual business value? So the idea of content triggering in our environment is more about what are the other data points that we can bring in as opposed to that kind of single point to point. Another example would be in the drive-through environment, right? We've done all the tracking and the learning and the data components to it. And the next iteration for us is to be able to trigger, but we're triggering not necessarily on when somebody walks up and the first time that they've ordered a product. We could trigger on the make and the model and the persona of the vehicle, i.e., if you're a proud minivan driver like I am, and you show up at 3:15 after you pick your kids up from school, you probably want to give them, cookies or something like that to put up on the screen. And that's information that you don't get unless you look at the data that's in front of you. You don't know that there's going to be a minivan rolling up, or you might even look at the congestion of the line and see what we call bulk and abandonment rates, i.e. how many people are peeling off that line, either for line busting, tell your people internally to go out there and try to break that line, or present things on the digital menu board that might be easier to make, right? And that can actually decrease the amount of time and increase that throughput. That's the idea of the accordion effect that you see within traffic when you're on the road and everybody's rubbernecking because there's an accident on the other side of the road, and it kind of can makes things kind of in and out. So if there's ways to relieve that congestion, you can show, again, the business outcome to the end customer that you're putting more cars through. We're measuring the whole thing, and if you change. So that's kind of how we're looking at it, as opposed to a single point. The digital sign is part of that larger ecosystem, and you can influence and measure based on not just that point to point, but also what's happening in the broader environment.
I'll hop on there that what we're seeing is the movement of money, advertising dollars specifically, into place-based advertising. Now, I think Raffi did a good job of really defining the utilization of digital signage in a very specific way. But when you think about the dollars that are going to enable some of that, it's going to come from the advertisers. They want to be able to influence that 40% that you referenced. Yeah, I can see a lot of brands getting behind that and wanting to do that. Dollars are coming out of the internet, if you will, an online experience into place-based because of this reason, because the technology is sophisticated enough where you can get the analytics, you can get the computer vision, you can start influencing the sale on place. And so this really for us is a high growth area. We see this as being a tremendous opportunity for resellers that maybe aren't into this world to start understanding exactly what's going on, partnering up with a company like a meldCX so that you can understand it and bring the right solutions to your customer base and enable them. So, but again, advertising dollars are going to definitely help to fuel this, right? And
I'll just add, check out the blog that I pulled that stat from, because it was a cool blog with 5 innovative digital signage campaigns.
Very
we
cool
absolutely
stuff.
Love.
Yeah,
highly recommend you check it out just to see some really cool, slick ways people are using signage. And really, part of it was just that it's fun and eye-catching stuff.
So
it's
that gets to the
customer
customer experience.
Super complicated.
No, a lot of them were customer experience ones, right? Like, we're gonna have a little bit of fun here,
right? But it's going to be memorable.
It's going to be memorable. Yeah. That's right.
I like that kind of stuff. I think that's pretty cool. That's a very simplistic way that I think anybody could deploy this and have a little AI attached to it without necessarily being like, all right, look, we're not talking about something where you have to measure and have 6 billion points of data in the background. There's some simple things you could do that can elevate your game, but still use a little bit of AI. So check out that blog, because I think there's some cool stuff in there to get your mind kind of spinning about how this stuff can work.
Absolutely.
So let's wrap up with one last unique use case for AI here: education. And again, there's another interesting blog you've got about this. I'll as always have all those links in the show notes so you can go check this stuff out. But tell us a little bit how meldCX is bringing innovation to classrooms in particular, and what may be next for schools related to AI. This is very relevant for me. I have a son who is just getting ready to start kindergarten, so I'm already thinking about what's his educational experience going to be like compared to mine. And I feel like there's going to be some pretty cool tech involved that I never
be a little different.
Got a chance to sniff at. Yeah,
it's gonna be a bit different depending on how open-minded your school district is, right? Because what I found with my own kids that are going into 5th and 3rd grade right now is that technology is it has to be so good that the trained education professional can use it and can understand what it is used for. Because if it's just asking educators to do technology, they go, I don't understand. And I got to tell you, we've got these sophisticated, quote unquote, iPad apps that our kids have, but fundamentally the teachers are taking pictures of a piece of paper, right? And then saying, this is your homework. And I'm like, okay, so isn't that just a copier? That's not that sophisticated. So just be warned that there could be some, as a technologist, you might get a little frustrated.
Yeah, I already have been. Trust me.
Okay, good. All right. So you know. So the way that we're approaching it again is, what kinds of problems are we trying to solve within education? And the one that we're going after, this is kind of a big swing, if you will, is really the democratization of the idea of how to train models and how to put things together and break it down for young children to be able to engage with technology and feel comfortable with it and feel like it's a collaborative experience. That's the C part of some of the work that we do. So one of the examples that we have, again, this was actually in partnership with Intel, where we put together a Lego build, if you will, where we've got a camera that's just kind of a Logitech camera hooked up into an Intel NUC that will do recognition of the different pieces, watch that assembly process happen, give prompts if something is in the wrong place or the right place, what's next, and create a bit of a gamified experience of putting together a Mars rover in this instance. There's a video online of that entirety of that experience. That is a proof of concept to say, are there ways that we can teach people how to assemble these quote unquote building blocks of technology together? It's the physical representation of what a technological build may be as well. And so for education for young children, it's about getting them introduced to a topic, getting them to understand like building blocks. You've probably seen some of the drag and drop coding examples of some of the apps. This is a physical representation of that, if you will. But if you take it to another bookend, I like to go to the other extreme typically. You can think about it if you're trying to teach a mechanic how to fix an engine or put an alternator together, right? Or some of these other kind of more complicated things. You could show up to a workstation and not know anything about it and have all these pieces together. And then the image recognition is looking at how those things may be assembled. And you're doing prompted learning because it's not just the labor. So this is the business problem part. It's not just the labor of people that you're trying to train to get there, but it's also the trainers that are the problem. Because you've got people retiring en masse that have 35 to 40 years of institutional knowledge that's not necessarily able to pass it down and bring it to the next generation. So that's kind of our approach. Yeah, it's computing intensive. Yeah, it's a bit of an edge use case, but that's where it starts to get really, really interesting because education, like healthcare and some of the other markets, are just kind of old and they've been a bit stagnant, and there's not an opportunity, or there hasn't been necessarily an opportunity to really reinvent how people are interacting with technology. I see smart boards; they're in there. Some use them very, very well. I see things like iPads and Zoom and all the rest of it are used to a frustrating degree. But when it comes to kind of cool applications where we can get people to use their hands as opposed to using their keyboard and their mouse, that's where we think that there might be an opportunity within education, whether that be primary or trades.
It's brilliant. I mean, we need to move our education system along a little bit, because we were joking about how long does it take to make a law that's going to catch up, or how long? And so, unfortunately, we don't want to be there with our education system, right? We don't want to be teaching kids what was relevant in the 70s and 80s and 90s and these curriculums. So I love the fact that you are bringing the technology back, physicality into it. It's a really fascinating little use case if you go watch the video of it. Yeah,
agree.
It's pretty cool.
I'll just add on. I used to work in educational publishing, and around the time that I was leaving that industry, we were just starting to introduce a lot of software. This is at the collegiate post K through 12 schools, and I worked with a lot of institutions that were like tech schools, trade schools, career colleges, the ones that are teaching stuff like HVAC repair, automotive repair, medical assisting, stuff like that. So what you were just mentioning earlier, and we were just getting around to putting out some softwares out there. Like I think one of the coolest ones, the last ones that I had seen, was like an HVAC repair software that was basically just like, Doom 3D style, 3D modeling where you could walk into the house and walk down the steps to the furnace or whatever, pop it open. You could pick your tool to check out, to identify like the freon levels or whatever, stuff like that. I mean, and it was pretty neat at the time, but that was, 15 years ago. That's the kind of stuff where like now I can see like some of this newer technology and, computer vision, AI, augmented reality, just taking that to another level where you can help students and help, people that are trying to train for these type of jobs, where instead of having like, hey, we've got 2 HVACs that we've from the 1980s that we're still having people train on. Hey, maybe you got a couple folks working on that and getting the hands-on work, while everyone else in the class is working on these 3D models of something new, like a new heat pump version or something like that. And just really getting hands-on in a different kind of way, but yet still giving them that experience. Not to mention also working on stuff where if you mess up, you're not potentially going to harm yourself or electrocute yourself or blow something up. It's a little bit more of a safer environment. So I'm excited about this. I think this stuff, is. To your point, it's probably not going to show up in your local schools anytime soon, but I'm excited to see where this stuff can go, and I think there's going to be some really cool, innovative new ways to do education in the future.
For sure.
Yeah, we're excited about it as well. It's a big bet that could pay off. We'll see. We'll see what the future holds.
There you go. All right. Well, hey, before we wrap up here and tell our VARs maybe a little bit of how they can get in on this game and work with folks like Meld and where to go, where to look for these type of opportunities. As always, thanks so much to our TEConnect sponsors. Thanks so much to Intel, who is one of those sponsors and lended us and recommended meldCX for us for this particular episode. Thanks to all your viewers, as always. Hey, we want to always hear from you. Let us know if you like the show. Like, subscribe, hit that like button, smash it on YouTube, leave us comments.
That's right.
Send us in some information. If there's something you want to hear about on the show, again, we're getting ready to talk all about this AI stuff. If there's a topic we miss, if there's something you want us to dive a little further into.
We got to dig a little deeper with Raffi on something.
You go.
Yeah, right.
Send us that info. Tell us like, hey, I wish you had asked Raffi about this. Fine, we'll drag him back on and ask him again in the future. I'm sure
he's got a cool studio.
Yeah,
I mean, he's good to go. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
cool
send
studio check, ability to talk check,
exactly.
To come back.
There you go. That's all you need. So send us that stuff in. As always, there's a link in the show notes where you can drop us suggestions. We'll give you a TEConnect podcast t-shirt just for sending a submission in, whether we use it or not. And as always, if you want to stay connected with us, you can always find us on Twitter at TEConnectPod or email us techconnect@bluestarinc.com. All right, let's wrap things up, first of all, with our value to the VAR segment. Kind of our way of giving a little bit of a takeaway to our audience. And, as I mentioned, a lot of our VARs work with businesses that are pretty much going to be the SMB level. So, and we've talked about this in other episodes before. Sometimes we talk about technology that you're going to see rolled out in like the giant Walmarts of the world, the McDonald's of the world, the big, multinational brands that are out there. But these solutions we're talking about, though, do they have a place when you get beyond the tier 1 retailers? We've kind of hinted at that a little bit. Where do you see those opportunities out there, and how can they find opportunities to partner with companies like Meld to bring that maybe down to a little bit of a closer to home level?
We think so. We think it's almost like your F1 driving team, right? When Ferrari puts that out, or some of the other kind of racing teams, the tier 1 retailers are always going to be the most innovative, and they're going to spend the most money. But the offshoot of that is something that can be apply to a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. There's not a lot of uptake right now, again, because we're focusing in kind of on the enterprise and we kind of flow down. But some of the things that are coming out are load up a camera, put it on. If you want to know how many people are in a given environment, if you want to do, kind of drive-through analysis, think about the franchisee that has 5 McDonald's or kind of any other brand. McDowell's, if you want to go back in the Wayback Machine in the 1980s, that could have kind of that level of information. So if you've got a couple of properties that you want to understand basic data, and just instead of calling around and all the different office managers, if you want to just look at one pane of glass and understand a little bit of information about how your environments are being utilized, we see that there's a value. And it's a software subscription and a camera, effectively, right? When you really boil it down. So we think that level of data is going to be important because the smaller and medium-sized retailers of today are going to be the big ones of the future, potentially. And the ones that embrace technology early on and have a better understanding of what's happening in their environment can react and be more nimble than some of the bigger folks. So there's an appetite, there's an opportunity. We've got to find the right ones that understand the upside and the potential. But yeah, I think that there's absolutely an opportunity for the SMB environment.
And let's go a little bit farther, Raffi, on how meldCX works with resellers, right? So you said early on there's a desire on your side to have value, work with value-added resellers. Can you comment on that a little bit?
Sure. So we go distribution out, right? That's the way for us to be able to manage, right? So part of my job is to churn up this end customer opportunity so that we understand, so that we can kind of feed it back, if you will. So the folks that we're looking at from a partnership understanding are predominantly focused in kind of, retail QSR banking is really kind of what we're focused on now. Anything with a drive-through effectively as well. That can offer something besides moving a box, if you will. What are the other things that they do that can be unique that can help out the customer a little bit more? Are you a specialist installer? Do you know a lot about networking? Do you know are you connected with the marketing departments maybe within a customer that makes it a little bit unique? So there's got to be some level of kind of engagement and understanding and maybe some intellectual curiosity from the VAR to be able to kind of chew on something like computer vision, because it's not easy. But once you get it and you learn it, you can be a leader, right, in your environment. And that's where we think that value is. So for the ones that are aggressive, that are intellectually curious, that have the right kinds of businesses that are supporting the technology around this, I think are great fits, and we'd love to work with them.
Really well said. And we always talk about partner-assisted growth in your business, right? And so if you're a reseller, that's why we bring people like meldCX to the table. We're hoping that, eventually there may be a good marriage here. You can't know everything. You need experts like these guys on your side, intellectually curious. I like that, having a curiosity about how this is going to take place. And you've got customers that you know already, and you've already implemented a number of technology solutions. These are ones that they are definitely looking at if they haven't told you, and they're going to be interested in. So yeah.
I go back to something, Raffi, that you mentioned earlier when you were kind of talking about, how stores, especially like when you're talking about the item level type stuff, or figuring out like what people actually are picking up and looking at and doing with the items. And I think, if you want a good talking point, I think to somebody maybe at a smaller level who, again, let's be honest, a lot of these conversations are just going to be conversations right now. Maybe they're not ready to pull in the deployment. Maybe they're not ready to pull the trigger yet, but it's never too early to start having conversations about this technology, because eventually it will be en masse and it will be trickled down to even your mom and pop stores. So I think a great way to maybe start having that conversation is, hey, you probably have a lot of good data about what you are selling, about what's actually running through the register, and what your actual sales data is, what's actually going out the door. Wouldn't you like to have a little more data about what you aren't? Maybe what people are picking up and then putting back down. Like you mentioned earlier, like the idea of like maybe they're picking something up, taking a picture of it and putting it back down. That's telling you your pricing maybe needs to change, or what parts of your store they're just not even going into. Like little things like that. If you just ask some of those questions, you might be surprised how many people don't have answers to them, or have a ready answer, but also don't understand why that thing is happening. Like, you know what? No one's buying this product over here. I can't find it in any other stores, so I started stocking it, but no one seems to buy it for me. I don't know why. That's the kind of stuff where like, hey, down the road, maybe if we do a little bit of computer vision, if we add a little bit of automation and AI in here and, kind of start watching what's actually happening around your store, we might be able to help you answer those questions in the future. So in my mind, I think that's a good playing field to start with. Is like, even if you think my customers are not ready for this, I'm not going to bother with this, at least start talking to them and asking them questions about the kind of things that could lead here, because there's no reason not to do that right now. And you'd be surprised. One, you might be surprised how many of them actually are open
talking
to this
about. I guarantee you they are. Right? Yeah.
And more importantly, as always, you're setting that bar of I'm someone who's an expert in this. I'm asking the right questions. I understand what's going on in your store. I care about what you're dealing with. So that when the time comes that you are willing to make this,
you're in the running
to make this leap, you're one of the first people.
Or you'll get a call
about. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yep.
So, 100%. That's why we like to educate, right? The more you educate your end customer, the more likelihood they are to come back to you with complicated questions that you might be able to answer.
There you go.
Yep.
There you go.
That's
and I'm sure you got plenty of questions out of this particular podcast.
Yes, sir.
You can go out there and ask them about it. All right, let's wrap up as always with our favorite segment, What's Tech Connecting with You, where we get to talk about something in the world of tech, science, innovation that is
or otherwise
got our attention. Whatever we feel like. We've done this 150 plus times. We just pull random stuff out every week. But Raffi, I'll start with you. What's Tech Connecting with You this week?
I'm curious to know how the next generation of communication networks are going to happen. There was an article that came out that said that SpaceX and their Starlink system has about 50% of the low Earth satellites currently in orbit right now. And that's a lot for one company and one person to control, in addition to all the other things. So I'm curious to see how this net new technology, if you will, is going to enable and create disruption within the world, because it is profoundly impacting even the war in Ukraine. Right? It's a fascinating piece of technology and where we are right now in the moment.
It is not just that, but also people apparently can see these satellites all over the place. The Starlinks. Have you ever seen them? But apparently,
no. My eyes are garbage. So no,
I can relate.
I live in Chicago. I can't see the night sky.
Yeah. I've had several people say to me, whatever. I live in Arizona, and boom, you can see them just flying around. Yeah. But they're recognizable when they come out. But it's true. It's fascinating how communication may change. So
it might be the next version of a space race.
Who
can put the most communication stuff up in the sky?
That's why I'm so interested in it.
It's
because
over.
It's already over.
Right. Yeah.
He's dominating. I mean, that's 50% of the totality of all of the low Earth satellites.
It's crazy.
Don't forget about even just communication.
Right.
He probably has about 90% of the communication satellites.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Yeah. Crazy.
Crazy. If you've already got 50% of something, you've already won. Yeah, there's not much competition left at that point. So
no question. Yeah. Talk about how governments take a while to get caught. There's a perfect example.
Yeah. One day there'll be a meeting on Capitol Hill in about 15 years. Going, wait a minute, what do you mean? Yeah.
What did we do? Yeah.
Explain satellites.
Yeah.
All right, Dean. What's Tech Connecting with you?
Well, I may have disgusted people with one of my other Tech Connectings the other day, where we talked about cement that was being using diapers.
Diapers.
Yeah. Okay, so I got a better one for you here, but it's still solving the battery.
Yourself?
No, it's not outgrossing myself. Engineers have demonstrated cement mix capable of storing and conducting electrical charge.
Okay.
Future application may include wireless charging of electric vehicles or powering homes, which was pretty cool. So that grabbed my attention. And apparently, they've got it all worked out in the sense that researchers came up with a way to store electricity in cement using cheap and abundant materials, right? So we can store it, and it consists of two electrically conductive plates. I won't get into some of the technology. So the storing's not so much the issue; it's the retrieving it, the materials, and that's where the cement comes in, and they figured out a way to turn it into like the supercapacitor, if you will, utilizing materials such as graphene and carbon nanotubes, so that you can get it from the plate that's storing it and then transduce it and then actually utilize it. But they're really excited about this. They claim that they can, with the amount of concrete that's in a typical home, if you were to use this technology, you could store enough energy within that concrete to fuel the home for an entire day. So now you talk about being off the grid, right? I mean, you've got your solar panels, but if you were trying to get off the grid, you'd have to have this big old battery sitting there. Well, they figured it out a way to actually put it in the cement that's a part of your building. So I thought that was pretty fascinating, right? There you go. That. What will these engineers come up with next as it relates to storing energy? I'm telling you, the battery world is
eventually
like one of those
we're just going to be walking batteries.
Well, I mean, everything.
I guess we kind of are in a way, but yeah.
Yeah. But they'll figure out the way to get that energy, conveniently and store it in ways that are just fascinating.
I just felt like I just had a glimpse of the Matrix in my head when they were literally using humans for batteries.
Let's not go there, right?
Well, you know me, I always get down the dark path.
Yes,
at some point,
exactly. Humans is, the energy source. Unbelievable. So what's TEConnecting with you?
All right. So, I love to bring up the JWST, James Webb Space
Telescope.
Love
this thing. Yeah.
You might have seen a few weeks back, I guess it was about mid-July or so, a new image was released. I mean, there's always new images coming out, but one of the coolest and most fascinating I've seen yet was a stellar nursery, as they refer to it.
Oh,
so this is called the Rho Ophiuchi Stellar Nursery. It's 390 light years away from Earth. Yeah, so not that far off.
Oh, that's it?
It's the closest.
That's pretty damn close,
the
actually.
closest star-forming region to the Earth. They said it's a relatively peaceful stellar nursery, so it's not like, super
violent.
chaos.
Yeah.
But there's, again, as always, I've got a link in the show notes. I highly recommend you go check it out just to look at the image if you haven't seen it. And there's a cool little video that they put on there earlier too that kind of zooms in on it, across the cosmos.
Yeah.
But it's just this amazing, like, kind of cloud of dust and debris with these glowing stars that are forming inside of it. Almost looks like some kind of like spacefaring Lovecraftian monster or something kind of thing. It's just, it's absolutely gorgeous image. Every time you see this stuff, you look at it and you go like, well, this is clearly something someone illustrated. Right? Like, no,
AI generative.
This is literally what's happening out in our universe.
It's crazy
that we just can't see from here.
It's crazy, nor comprehend. Every time I look at stuff like that, I'm like, and then you realize the vastness of what you're actually looking at. This one little itty bitty part of the universe, like, dude, it's
like
just,
if we were there, our whole solar system would be one tiny little speck in this massive thing we're looking at. So always recommend checking that out. Just if you ever want to, realize just how small you actually are in the universe and how beautiful and amazing this universe actually is.
You got your kids on the James Webb there yet, Raffi? Do they see the images that are coming down from that thing, or no interest at all?
We've done a little bit of that, absolutely. And then, but fundamentally, they're interested in ice hockey.
Yeah, I understand. I totally get it.
That's their fascination.
Yeah. Northern Chicago,
like,
that's
great,
it.
Daddy.
Yeah.
They're not quite in the point of life where they're thinking about their place in the universe and how
or star nurseries.
I hope not.
Right now they're the center of the universe as far as they're concerned.
Right.
So.
I'd rather chuck somebody into the boards.
Yeah.
As it should be is right.
Exactly.
If I don't have to, right?
There you go. All right, that's what's TEConnecting with us today. Unfortunately, it is time for us to unplug. Raffi Vartian, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate having you on the show. Hey, okay, so next week, part 2 of our trilogy.
Part 2 of the trilogy.
Tony Boncourt from Honeywell coming on to talk about a little bit more about AI in retail in particular.
Fair enough.
So stay tuned for that one. So
all right.
Until next time, folks, please stay connected. TEConnect Podcast is brought to you by Zebra. It's that time again, Dean.
Oh, boy.
No, it's not Christmas.
Oh, what? Oh,
well,
man.
Maybe, depending on when you're listening to this.
True. Could be. Yeah.
It's not Toyotathon. Is it? I don't know. I don't keep track of that.
They always go on. But anyway. Yeah. Well, you got me excited. Okay. What is it? What
it is it's time to upgrade your customers to the latest products and solutions from Zebra Technologies.
Nice.
So Blue Star has done it again.
We have?
Should I leave that hanging there?
Yeah. The anticipation.
Questions for that one.
Yes.
What we've done is actually a good thing here. We've come through all of your sales history for Zebra Technologies and put together a custom report that will enable you to easily find and capitalize on low-hanging fruit.
Nice.
Who doesn't want that in sales?
It's like we're giving you the business intelligence.
Yeah.
I love it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So your customers may be using outdated technology or unsupported operating systems on devices that you originally sold them years ago. If you're not having these discussions with them about refreshing their devices and upgrading to the latest technology, well, you can bet some other company will do that. So get out in front of it while you can with our help. So what you can expect in your refresh report is a historical sales data from 2015 to 22, upgrade opportunities by converting 1D scanners to 2D imagers, 2G, 3G devices to LTE enabled, and EOL Windows to Android. This report also includes expert recommendations, resources to help you with upgrade conversations, and much more. So sometimes the easiest sales you can make are the ones that you've already made.
Righto.
Get your Zebra refresh Status report at the link in the show notes or contact the Blue Star Zebra team. TEConnect Podcast is also brought to you by Elo. Elo is expanding their versatile line of commercial solutions, adding Linux alongside their market-leading Windows and Android-enabled hardware.
Ooh, getting into Linux.
They are. Elo's Linux-based platform offers an expansive lineup across sizes and form factors, Linux device drivers, uniform SDKs, and a constantly growing set of tools. Linux is now available on Elo's 10, 15, and 22-inch iSeries displays and the Elo Backpack for digital signage, self-service kiosk, POS, KDS, and more. To learn more about Elo's Linux offerings, check out the link in the show notes or reach out to the Blue Star Elo team.